Hello, my name is Travis West. I'm the Extension Educator for 4-H in Benton County. And today we're going to talk about the challenge of taking a market rabbit project. When we start, we'll talk about the rise of the market rabbit project within Ohio 4-H. So in 10 short years, we've added another 2,000 4-H and FFA members exhibiting market rabbit projects at county fairs across Ohio. So a huge increase in those that may not be familiar with rabbit projects or want to take on the additional challenge of trying to match up 2 or 3 rabbits to a pen to exhibit a market rabbit project. Part of the rise for these projects is space. Having the space to raise adequately a larger animal may be a challenge for some 4-H and FFA members we have enrolled in our programs. And so rabbit and poultry projects have been on the rise because of that restricted space. When you talk about market rabbit projects, one of the main keys is animal well-being. So daily observation of those animals. So are those animals exhibiting what you would consider normal behavior? Are they drinking and eating like they should be? Changes in that consumption of food or water, or changes in their daily behavior are things that throw up a flag and have us thinking, there must be something going on. So let's explore that a little further. Typically, rabbits, when fed, might come to the front of the cage. If 2 or 3 rabbits come to the front of the cage and one sits in the back of the cage, it's typically a sign that you might need to check out that rabbit that's not acting in that normal behavior to come to the front of the cage when you feed each morning and evening. Housing considerations. So whether you're new to taking a market rabbit project or you've had other rabbit projects, breeding or pet rabbit projects, thinking about housing is a little bit different when it comes to market rabbits. So the things that we want to talk about are making sure that you're considering the growth of your market rabbit project. So when we buy those, either we're raising those out of our own rabbits, or maybe we're buying 5 to 6 week old bunnies. The amount of growth those rabbits are going to have might affect the amount of space in the cage that we need to have. So thinking about how much space do we need? And so animal welfare restrictions tell us that those animals, all of the animals in the cage need to be able to stand up, turn around, and lay on its side. So when you think about 4 6-week-old bunnies laying on their side, that amount of space is a little bit different than when we talk about 10-week-old rabbits, each of them weighing 5 pounds, trying to all lay on their side at the same time and have adequate space on the floor of that cage. The other consideration we need to have is thinking about the need to regulate feed consumption on some of those rabbits. So typically when you purchase rabbits, they are of similar size, but as those rabbits eat and grow, they're going to grow at different rates. So being able to sort rabbits based on size or separate rabbits out that you need to decrease the feed consumption to meet that weight requirement for your county fair are also other things you need to consider. So maybe one cage is not adequate to finish your market rabbit project between the time you receive those rabbits and the time that you exhibit them at the county fair. The other thing we need to think about is ventilation and temperature. So ventilation, we're talking about air movement. If you've raised rabbits before, you know that the ammonia content in rabbit urine is pretty high. So any enclosed spaces that don't have good air movement, you're going to smell and experience that high ammonia content. It could be burning to the nostrils when you ingest that air, and it's also not good for the rabbits. We think about temperature. So I typically tell kids to think about rabbits as yourself, but wearing a fur coat during the summer. So if your parents made you in June and July wear a fur coat, that's what the rabbit experiences 365 days a year. So humidity and high temperatures are not ideal for rabbits. When we talk about selection of rabbits, so if you're raising your own rabbits, I always suggest that kids have a litter of bunnies before their fair bunnies are born, so you can kind of look at growth rates, how those rabbits match up, do they look similar in body type. If you're not raising your own rabbits and you're buying rabbits from another breeder, some of the considerations of 5 to 6 week old bunnies that you want to um, start with is making sure that you're staying within the same litter. So at 5 to 6 weeks old, it's really hard to tell what sort of body type those rabbits are going to have at 10 to 12 weeks old. But you typically want to stay within the same litter. That helps with consistency because it's nearly impossible to judge those rabbits at 5 to 6 weeks old when you're picking them up from the producer. Make sure that they're at that stage still similar in size, so that gives you the best chance that once you get to the fair, you're going to have multiple rabbits that are growing at the same rate and that you have to pick from. Some other things to consider: they need to be the same breed and they need to be the same variety. And variety in this indication, when we're talking about rabbits, typically means color. So for example, we're not going to put a white New Zealand and a black New Zealand together in a pen of rabbits. Likewise, we're not going to use red satins and Siamese satins in the same meat pen of market rabbits. I also suggest that exhibitors make sure breeders are willing to answer your questions and help you along the way. That's going to be key to a successful project. If you have some experience, that might be less of an issue, but if you're new to the market rabbit project, definitely have a breeder that's going to help you talk through how to pick those rabbits out when they're selling them to you, giving you some pointers on feed, housing, ventilation, all of those sort of aspects. When we get to those 5 to 6 week old bunnies, again, I said it's pretty hard to tell what their body type is going to look like, but orienting yourself to the three major meat cuts in a rabbit, those being foreshoulders or um, shoulders, hindquarters, and loin. And so when we start from the head of the rabbit, we talk about right behind the neck, you're going to talk about shoulders. And so when I say fullness, I mean width of that loin. So the loin goes from the back of the rib cage to where the two hind legs connect, and then fullness in the hindquarters. Again, it's going to be um, fairly hard to tell a lot of differences in rabbits at 5 to 6 weeks old, but sometimes you can tell that they are narrow in those shoulders, or that width of loin when you rub your hand over that doesn't feel quite as wide as the other. So if you get a choice of picking out those rabbits from that same litter, making sure you're picking out the best options, given a few pointers here. Nutrition. So when we talk about nutrition, water plays a key role in regulating body temperature. So when we think about rabbits that are wearing those fur coats and we want to regulate that body temperature, the lower you can keep that body temperature, the more feed they're likely to consume. And of course, in a market rabbit project, we're trying to hit a weight requirement for our fare. So consumption of feed is important in a lot of ways, not just weight gain, but in firmness of flesh condition for that rabbit once you get it to the county fair. Making sure your rabbits have access to fresh, clean water. They're going to consume more cool water, again, going into that regulating body temperature. So the more often you change that water during the summer and replace it with cold water, the more water that your rabbits are going to consume. And then we talk about nutrients. And so there are a lot of pelleted, bagged, branded feeds out there, typically anywhere from 15% to 18% protein. And so 18% is going to give you a little higher growth rate, 16% is going to give you a good growth rate, but maybe grow at a slower rate. And so determining what one of those is best for you is in your purview. The other suggestion I would have is that when you purchase those rabbits from a breeder, that you ask what feed they're feeding, because if you can minimize the changing of that feed, that typically gives you one step ahead of not having to transition from one feed to the other as you're changing the environment of those rabbits when you bring them home. So what sorts of things should we be thinking about leading up to fair? What things should I be doing between the time I receive those rabbits and fair? So planning for transportation to the fair. A lot of people might pick up rabbits in a cardboard box or some other contraption at 5 to 6 weeks old. Again, thinking about the amount they're going to grow. They're going to be much bigger than that when you have to transport them to the fair. So thinking about overcrowding, temperature control when you're transporting those rabbits, what sorts of appropriate cages or containers can you have in place so that you can transport those rabbits to the fair? And really our goal here is reducing the amount of stress that those rabbits have between your house and getting to the county fair, because the stress, of course, is going to increase when they get to that strange environment, lots of people, lots of strange rabbits, and anything that just happens to be different from your home environment, of which there are a lot at the county fair. The other thing you should be doing is tracking your weight or growth rates of those rabbits, so weighing those rabbits. Um, the closer you get to fair, maybe it's every 2 or 3 days, maybe it's weekly, to kind of track the weight of those rabbits to make sure that they're growing at the appropriate weight. When you see one lagging behind, that might be the instance where you need that extra cage to pull one out and try to get that rabbit to consume more feed. Or maybe you have a rabbit that's getting super close to that top weight of your county fair and you want to um, kind of move back that growth rate and regulate the consumption of feed that rabbit has so that the rest of the pen can catch up. When we talk about matching up rabbits, so whether your county has a pen of 2 or a pen of 3, there are multiple ways of doing that. So 88 county fairs and there are 88 sets of rules. So make sure that you know what those rules are. But when it talks about matching your rabbits up, so the things we look at are body type and conformation. So make sure that you're posing those rabbits. Again, going back to that fullness through the shoulders, loin, fullness in the hindquarters. Again, assessing those at this age as well. Posing those rabbits side by side. So does their body type, their rise of their body type from the shoulder to the high point over the hip, do those look similar? Do they have similar width of body through those shoulders and hindquarters? And a common question we typically get is, where does weight factor in? So people get all excited because they weigh their rabbits in at the fair. And it's like, oh yes, all 3 of mine in my pen weighed the same. And yes, that's great, but that's not the only consideration. So if those rabbits have 3 totally different body types, just because they weigh the same doesn't mean that you have an advantage over others. So when we talk about weight, I typically suggest to kids that anything 6 ounces or under, so that's 6 ounces of difference between the lightest rabbit and the heaviest rabbit, is usually pretty unnoticeable to judges. So if I have a rabbit that weighs 5 pound 4 ounces and one that weighs 5 pound 8 ounces, I have one that weighs 5 pound 6 ounces, and then I have 2 more that weigh 5 pound and 4 ounces. I'm not necessarily going to put those 3 5 pound 4 ounce rabbits together in a pen. I'm going to take all 5 of those rabbits. I'm going to look at their type, their conformation, pose them side by side, and then pick the 3 rabbits that come the closest to being mirror images of each other. So our goal here is uniformity across the 3 rabbits in that pen of 3. And those would be the 3 rabbits that I would select to take to the fair to weigh in. I hope this is giving you a few pointers to get you started on your market rabbit project with success. Good luck this year.